One thing we have not talked about yet in conjunction with paper one is MLA citation. I do want you to use MLA citation when you turn in your final draft of this paper. I don't know how familiar you may be with it. I know it sounds complicated, but for this paper at least, it's a pretty easy process. MLA citation is just a way of citing the sources you quote or use in the course of your paper. In this paper, you really only should be using one source, and you should be using it only, I would say, fairly sparingly. So let me explain what I mean by that. Remember that in your week 2 lesson, you have this folder, paper one stuff. In here, you have several things. The first thing we're going to look at real quickly is the sample student essay. Now, what I want to call attention to is the student's MLA citation. Basically, all this is a system for letting your readers know where the summaries or quotations that you draw from other sources come from and how they could find them in theory if they wanted to. So note here that the student who wrote this particular sample paper quoted Thoreau in their opening paragraph. So we have this opening sentence which puts in context where the essay comes from. Henry David Thoreau's essay, Where I Lived and What I Lived For, addresses many issues concerning life and how it should be lived. And then in the next sentence, he actually quotes the text. One issue he wrote about in particular deals with the way people simplify their lives. Thoreau believed that you should let your affairs be as 1, 2, or 3, not 100 or 1,000. Now, MLA citation is just a simple system that helps readers identify where passages come from. So you'll notice after the student has quoted this passage, there is a very brief parenthetical expression. What I mean by that is just these numbers in this set of parentheses here, where the number 286 is. All this is the page number where this particular quote was taken. So when you are quoting text or even summarizing text in your paper, you should, after doing so at the end of the sentence where you quote the text, put a brief parenthetical expression that lets the reader know where that particular quote came from. Okay? It's that simple. So you end your quote at the end of the sentence, and then after that, you do a parenthetical expression, and then you place a period here at the end of that sentence after the parentheses. That's all you've got to do within the text itself. So you should do that every time you quote a passage. The other thing about MLA citation is what's known as the works cited page. There is an example in paper one stuff of a works cited page example. Let me pull that up. It looks exactly like this. This is a page that follows the text of your paper. It should be a separate page. It should be titled Works Cited here in the middle of the page. And then you have this format here, which provides information about the text you use. In this first paper, you should have one entry for the essay you use, generally just in the introduction, although some people like to quote the essay more than one time through the course of the paper. That's fine. But however many times you're going to quote it, you only have it as an entry on your final works cited page one time. It's pretty simple. The author, the title of the article, Wake Tech English 111 Reader is the title of the book it comes from. This would be in italics to note that it is the title of a work. Third ed here means third edition. And then we provide one of the editors, the publisher's name, Macmillan Learning, and then the date and the page numbers. Okay, that's all there is to it. And this is all the information that you would need. The other thing here I would say, though, about works cited is notice how this particular entry is formatted. So you begin flush to the margin here, and then you indent in lines after. I think students' general tendency would be to indent the first line and then do it like a paragraph where it looks that way. This kind of formatting is wrong. It needs to look like the example I had when I began, so that the first line is flush with the margin, and then later lines here are indented one tab space. Okay, so that's what your works cited page should have. And that's all I want you to concentrate on works cited for this particular first paper, just so you get in the practice of doing it. What I mean by that is you do the in-text citation, whereas you can see, as we talked about in the sample paper, you have the page numbers in parentheses after the text itself, and then the works cited page, which should look like this. Okay. One last thing to note about the in-text citation. Sometimes you, in addition to the page number, you might include the author's name if it's not been previously mentioned. So technically this parenthesis, the parenthetical here might be Thoreau 286, but in this case it's completely unnecessary because in the sentence prior, the student has already mentioned the name of the author who he's quoted. So the rule of thumb should be that if in the sentence where you quote the passage, you have the author's name, then all you put is the page number here. If you don't have the author's name, then you would need, hypothetically, to add it here to let the reader know which particular author and therefore which work the page number, the page reference of the quote comes from. Okay? So those two things are what I want you to do in terms of works cited in this paper. Make sure you have parenthetical expressions within your paper itself in the quoted text, and then you have at the end of your paper a separate works cited page that looks like this, that explains which particular book your particular quote or series of quotations comes from. Okay, there is more information on MLA citation if you need it in your Rules for Writers textbook. But that is all I want you to work on right now. Just in case you're curious or want to know, your book is considered an anthology, which is a collection of stories or essays or poems, and then Douglas's essay within it would be a work within an anthology. Okay, that's a way of understanding how to cite that particular kind of book. Right. If you have more questions about works cited information, please let me know. Otherwise, I will let you get back to work. Thank you very much.